I grew up traveling in the backseat of my family's wood-paneled station wagon. Getting lost fills my soul. It's who I am. It's embedded in my DNA. I'm on a mission to explore and experience every country on the planet, visiting the craziest, most unique places and people in every corner of the world. I'm Jim Kitchen. Join the journey. So how many of you remember from your history books anything about the Korean War and what caused all the tension between North Korea and the United States? For me, while growing up, this was not a subject that we learned much about in our history classes. Instead, we learned a lot about Vietnam. And yet it's this conflict that dominates our headlines and impacts so much of our foreign policy attention. So let me give you a little bit of background on this conflict. Now, prior to World War II, actually in 1910 until the end of World War II in 1945, all of Korea was ruled by the Japanese. This was a poor area with most people surviving on subsistence farming. So in World War II, it ends and the Japanese are defeated, and this region becomes a battleground, a proxy war for competing ideologies, communism versus democracy. In 1945, the Soviets declare war against Japan and they send troops to Korea, and the US becomes very concerned that the Soviets will occupy all of Korea and then all of Asia. So the US proposes to the Soviets that they take North Korea and the US takes Southern Korea, with the dividing line being the 38th parallel. And that's where I was today. In fact, I was officially in North Korea. And that was the line. When we crossed that table, I'll show it to you over here. That line, that cement line, was the demarcation line. So in September of 1948, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the DPRK, is formed, and the Soviets install Kim Il-sung as the premier. And he decides he wants to reunify the Korean peninsula. He goes to China for support, gets it, then the USSR, who also agrees, and the North Korean troops invade South Korea. In June of 1950, Kim Il-sung's North Korean army, equipped with Soviet tanks, they quickly overwhelm this 38th parallel, and South Korea and the United States comes to their aid. Why did the US get involved? Well, after watching most of Eastern Europe and then China become communist after World War II, the US did not want to appear soft on communism. And ferocious battles ensued. At first, the North Koreans, they had the upper hand, pushing their way to Seoul, South Korea. And it's at that point that General Douglas MacArthur, who had led the fight in World War II, he took command. He recaptured South Korea, Seoul, and actually advanced into North Korea. And that's when China sent troops to fight against the American and UN troops. So why did China get involved? Well, they were afraid that the US, if they became too powerful and they won this war decisively, they would eventually invade China. So the war went back and forth. A stalemate ensued for the next 2 years with lots of bombing going on. And as a result of this bombing, North Koreans built schools, they built hospitals, built factories, and all of their military operation centers underground. Why is this important? Well, think about their nuclear testing facilities today. They're all underground. So finally, an armistice was agreed to and signed in July of 1953, essentially returning Korea back to the 38th parallel, the same as when the war had started. Historians call the war a stalemate, but what resulted was a country that was formed, the DPRK, whose sole and entire existence was to be anti-American, which also justified North Korea's totalitarian regime. Today we're on the border of Liangchun China. See here behind me in North Korea, where the differences could not be any more pronounced. Now, from the road leading into Liangchun, in the evening time, it looks like Las Vegas. Bright lights, party central, vibrant street markets, and lots of excitement. However, at night, on the North Korean side over here, there are no lights on whatsoever. Why? Because there's no electricity. Now, today, we're here on the Yalu River, and we see the North Korean people fishing, getting water. 100 or so people are working in the fields over there. They're likely planting rice. And these buildings behind me, they're similar to the old Soviet collective farms where the government housing is provided, and during the day the adults work in the field, the children go to school. There's an elementary school over there. The top students might go to the university in Pyongyang, and then they would return to their village. Now this is pretty much what life is like across rural North Korea. Simple, people working in the fields, tilling their soil, planting and harvesting their crops day after day, much like people do throughout Asia and Southeast Asia, with the difference being that these crops are for the benefit of the North Korean state.
Cold. Right. These are the noodles, and this is spilling it all over. Got some cucumber and some kimchi and some spicy stuff and some mystery juice. And here we go.
Yeah. You like it? So you like it or not?
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
Okay.
Love it. Yeah.
We are looking out on the China-North Korea Friendship Bridge across the Yalu River connecting Dandong, China and Sinuiju, North Korea. Now this is one of the few borders connecting China and North Korea. So that bridge is the Friendship Bridge. And the one that I'm standing on now is known as the Broken Bridge. So between 1950 and 1951, this broken bridge was repeatedly attacked by American planes during the Korean War to stop the supplies and troops sent from China into North Korea. And the Friendship Bridge was built just after the war. So you can see that I'm at the end of this broken bridge, and American planes bombed this broken bridge at the China-North Korea cutoff point, right smack dab in the middle of the river and of the bridge. And it was never repaired, so the North Koreans today use it as a reminder, showing the damage done and the aggression caused by the Americans. Okay, so here's the deal. So I mentioned that we're in Dandong, China, and this city's sole reason, this city's existence, is it functions as the primary trading post between China and North Korea. This is a huge city, 2.4 million people. So you've heard so much about the stifling and crippling US and UN sanctions on North Korea. And it is through Dandong, see it over here, and this bridge over here, come check this out. Coal moves, materials, technology, a train just came over in the morning. Truckloads of North Korean laborers commuting into China daily from North Korea into China, and then they bring those trucks and trains back in the afternoon, all in violation of the sanction provisions. It all comes through here in Dandong, China. Today we're at the beautiful Mount Pengtu in Heaven Lake, a crater lake on the border between China and North Korea. And it was formed by a major volcanic eruption in the year 1597. You can see that Heaven Lake, it's crescent shaped, and melted snow is its water source. The scenery is spectacular, it's breathtaking. This is an area that's very important culturally for most Koreans. So during the Korean summit, Kim Jong-un and Moon Jong-il visited Heaven Lake, and the South Korean leader actually filled a bottle with some of the water from Heaven Lake to take back to South Korea, because mythologically speaking, this is an important place for Koreans. Today I'm in the northeastern part of China in a seldomly visited part of the Great Wall known as Tiger Mountain Great Wall. And this part of the Great Wall was built in 1469 in order to prevent invasions from the Mongol forces and other tribes to the north, and to protect the northeastern border from the Japanese or Korean attacks from the south. And what's really cool about this is we're at a place on the wall called the Yabucha, or one step across, marking the narrowest point between North Korea and China, known as 1 meter hop, just 3 feet between the countries. Come check out the Great Wall and the 1 meter hop. Here's the Great Wall there, 1 meter hop, and then come, you can see China's on the left, North Korea's on the right, and then come check out this view out here. There's North Korea on the right side of the river, the green guard tower. Guard was out there checking us out just a few minutes ago. And then there's the North Korean countryside. All right, today I'm on the Chinese-North Korean border.
at the shortest point between the borders. Literally a stone's throw. No. That one didn't make it. Nor did that one, but yeah, there we go.
Okay, so what happened after the Korean War? Well, Kim Il-sung's leadership. Kim Il-sung was the grandfather of Kim Jong-un. His leadership was predicated on Stalinism, as he revered Stalin, and in place of Marxism-Leninism, he established the practice of Juche, which is based on agricultural independence and, in general, a lack of dependency on anything or anyone. And while Juche was criticized by many for allowing this totalitarian regime in North Korea, it was important because the Soviets and the Chinese weren't always, and still aren't always, reliable partners for the DPRK. They are wily negotiators and survivors. In fact, they have played U.S. presidents since President Jimmy Carter made a visit to Pyongyang back in June of 1994 when he met with Kim Jong-il regarding North Korea trying to get nuclear weapons. And he returned back to the United States saying that the crisis had been solved. However, a couple years later, North Korea announced that they had successfully detonated a nuclear bomb underground and had tested an ICBM missile that could reach all the way to the United States. And in 2007, North Korea signed an agreement, international agreement, saying that they would shut down their nuclear reactors in exchange for economic assistance. However, they continued their nuclear testing programs, perfecting their ICBM technologies that we're seeing today. And they did all of that in underground facilities that we couldn't inspect. So it's good that Trump and Kim Jong-un are talking, but based on this practice of Juche, or independence, the lack of dependency on anything or anyone, it seems unlikely that the DPRK is going to give up their nuclear weapons. So what's needed, I think, is a shift in policy. Now, the world doesn't seem to mind that countries like Pakistan have nuclear weapons to defend themselves from their rivals. So what if North Korea agreed to limit its size of their nuclear arsenal, stop their threatening actions and rhetoric, agreed to stop exporting any weapon technologies to other rogue regimes or other rogue nations, and was open to international inspections, all in return for lifting these sanctions? Potentially could work, right? And if not, I think the United States will be content to play the long game, which means to impose sanctions indefinitely on North Korea, as we've done in Cuba, to slowly bleed and to further isolate the DPRK, one, to limit their capacity to export nuclear weapons to other countries, and number two, hoping that the DPRK will implode and potentially bring in a new and less despotic regime. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to keep exploring and learning about the rest of the world. Join the journey.